What's up, heathens? How's everybody doing today? Hope you're doing all right. Today we have an interview with Viced Rhino. If you guys don't know about Viced Rhino, go down below and hit subscribe. He's coming up pretty quick. He's already surpassed 10,000 subscribers, so you know he's definitely more popular than I am, or at least he's going to be soon. If not so by the time this goes up. So definitely subscribe to him. Got links down there for you guys. So hi there, Viced Rhino. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, had a pretty full day of work and everything like that. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, like just a little bit of a minor background?
All right. So as most of my viewers will know, I'm from Canada. So I'm one of the other Canadian atheists coming out. I actually grew up in a very moderate household. My dad, I believe, is an atheist, but you won't ever hear him talk about it because he just doesn't discuss religion or that sort of thing. He's very non-confrontational. So if it's going to get into a fight, he won't bring it up. My mother goes to a very liberal church. She goes to the United Church of Canada. They were one of the first churches to accept gay marriage, and you know they're very progressive in that way. But I somehow, through this very, very moderate upbringing, went off the deep end, and I ended up as a fundamentalist Christian, where in my mind it's basically God is all powerful and all knowing. So surely if he wants this book to say something, it will say it unambiguously. Therefore, the Bible should be taken literally. Therefore, we were created 6,000 years ago. Evolution's a lie, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of my background. So I'm a bit of a weirdo in that I wasn't indoctrinated into the fundamentalism right from day one. I kind of worked myself into it. And my mother is like, I don't think she accepts evolution now, but I think if I were to sit down and explain it to her, it would just be like, oh, okay, well, isn't it amazing how God works? So I'm just, I guess I'm the example of what can happen with a moderate upbringing and how you can have people go off the deep end still that way.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of curious, like what exactly like convinced you to become a fundamentalist Christian?
I was just thinking about it mostly is if God can do anything that he wants, then surely if he wants to write a book, he's going to make it say what he wants it to say. Now, I guess it kind of helps that I went to a Christian school, and I don't think that denomination is strictly young earth creationists. They don't really talk about it that much. But I actually remember my first year in that school. I come out of the public school system, going into a Christian school. They had a class called Christian Lifestyle class. And there was a guy from a different denomination was teaching us in grade 8. And I just remember having a conversation with him. At that point, I was accepting of evolution. So I actually, in the class, he talked about it briefly. And I just kind of pointed out, well, you know, I believe in evolution. I just believe that God guided it. And his response, I was grade 8, so I was fairly young. And he just like point blank, with all the confidence in the world, said, well, you're wrong. And like that, just how confident this, you know, to a kid in grade 8, this is an authority figure that's there to teach you things. They are supposed to know what they're talking about. And just, you know, point blank, not a quaver in his voice, says, no, you're wrong. Evolution didn't happen. That just kind of got me thinking that like, okay, well, maybe it didn't happen. Maybe I was wrong. And, you know, the more I thought about it, the more it did make sense that, you know, the Bible clearly says what God wants it to say, right? So it can't be wrong. And it doesn't say anything about evolution.
Well, like what happened after that? Like after the teacher was like point blank, well, you're wrong. like what was did you go home and were you like, oh my God, I'm wrong, I should take up fundamentalism now, or like that's hyperbole obviously, but I'm just kind of curious, like, what did that get you like thinking about it?
Yeah, that's what kind of got me to start thinking about it. I don't really remember exactly what I did with it. This was in the late 90s, so I had the internet for sure. So I guarantee I ended up on AIG.com or whatever their website is. I definitely remember going to Answers in Genesis a lot when I was in high school. I actually had a website of my own called Evolution is Stupid. It was on GeoCities of all places. So of course, you know, good content can be found on GeoCities. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, I was recently linked to GeoCities in support of some claims. So I've had
that was my website.
Oh, was it?
Well, yeah, I set up a website called Evolution is Stupid. I remember a lot of my source material came from Answers in Genesis. I'm sure, I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure I made use of the Heathens. I remember a lot of the language I used. Every time I hear Kent Hovind talking, I can almost hear what I was writing back then. Is like, just, you know, he's got the same confidence to him, even though he's completely ignorant of everything he talks about. It's, you know, I guess I was trying to put that same confidence into my little website. But yeah, I guess every time I came across something evolutionary, I would immediately Google it, try and see what the creationists were saying about it. And you know, that lasted. That school I went to, the Christian school, they did a pretty good job of following the curriculum. So I came out with a fairly decent understanding of what we're supposed to know about evolution. They did teach evolution in the classroom. And to the credit of the science teacher, I never knew he was a young Earth creationist until I had a conversation with my father years later. And it turned out at some parent-teachers meeting, he held up a painted turtle and pointed to the bottom and said something about the bottom of the painted turtle completely disproves evolution. And that was how I found out he was a creationist, because when he was in the science classroom, he was teaching the science that he was supposed to be teaching. And he was actually a big fan of Bill Nye. We watched a lot of Bill Nye, the Science Guy, in his classrooms. So it was actually a bit of a shock to me to find out he was a creationist. But I would always go into the science class with kind of like in the back of my head, like, oh, if he says something about evolution, this is what I can say back. And I was fairly argumentative about it. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, I guess, what was it like, you know, being kind of the odd one out, except on the creationist side in your family? Because I mean, you said that, you know, you were a fundamentalist Christian while other people in your family weren't. I'm wondering, did you have any hardships or anything like with family members during that time, or no?
No, not really. My dad is, like I said, he's very non-confrontational. So remembering back, I can see him kind of, you know, thinking, oh, this is ridiculous, but he wouldn't say anything about it because he's like, oh, this is his religion. I'm just going to leave him at it. And my mother, I would talk to her about stuff all the time because she is a religious one, but, you know, she would just, you know, she'd just agree with what I said. And like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But, you know, like I said, I could probably call her up now, explain evolution, explain how we know the Earth is billions of years old, explain how we know evolution happened, and she'd just be like, oh, yeah, isn't it wonderful how God chose to do it? So for her, it's not a salvation issue, I guess. So, like, he can believe what he wants, and, you know, ultimately it doesn't matter. So yeah, my family's been very accepting of my dad knows I'm an atheist now. My mother, I haven't come out and said I'm an atheist, but she knows that I have no intention of ever going back to church. So, you know, there's not really any family persecution. My family's been very good about everything religious wise. Okay.
What about any friends? Like, did you have any like pushback when you decided that you wanted to be a fundamentalist Christian? Like, was there any pushback there?
Not really, because I was going to a Christian school, so all my friends were at least moderate Christians for the most part. You I think most of them probably just looked at it as like, oh, this guy's being a bit weird, but let's just, leave that alone. It doesn't matter. I wasn't the most popular kid in school. I don't know if being a fundamentalist had anything to do with that, or if it's just I was a socially awkward teenager. I couldn't tell you. I only had I had a very small group of friends, and actually one of them, come to think of it, he's a bit like me in that he will sometimes, it's hard to tell what his actual position was, because he would often play devil's advocate and take up a position that he doesn't necessarily agree with just for the sake of getting an argument going. So
yeah, I know what that's like. I've had friends that just wanted to poke and start arguments just because they thought it was funny. I didn't find it too funny.
I can be argumentative. So I got along with him fairly well. I sometimes did the same thing to him. We'd mostly argue over politics. I think both of us have been all over the place on the political spectrum over the years. So It's good to have people that disagree with you and that sort of thing, so you can kind of re-examine your position.
Oh yeah, definitely agree with that. I say that, you need to regularly expose yourself to ideas that that are new to you or that you disagree with. It seems like there's a lot going around lately of standing fast in whatever belief you currently have. So I definitely agree with that. Now I'm kind of curious. You spent some time as a fundamentalist Christian. So what prompted you to question that belief?
Education. The more I learned, the more I realized that it wasn't possible. The way the world works just wasn't compatible with my worldview of the world. I started to look into things, and it just eventually, after learning about science, I realized that there is so much evidence to show that the universe is billions of years old, like everything from the cosmic microwave background radiation to so eventually I became an old earth creationist, where so God made the universe 14 billion years ago or whatever, and he took that time to get everything to where it is now, and then poof, that's when he plopped humans on there. And eventually I started learning about evolution and how much evidence there is for evolution, how we can track evolution specifically through our genetic code. And it seemed like every year there was a new discovery about something to do with evolution, and just added onto the pile of evidence for evolution. And so eventually I became like, okay, well, old Earth, but, maybe he didn't plop us fully formed 6,000 years ago. Maybe he did use those billions of years to guide an evolutionary process. And then, I spent years like that. So eventually I ended up just going to church, and I'd be sitting there and I'd be listening to pastors preach, and I'd be sitting there in my head thinking like, oh, that can't be right. It's just, do I really believe this? Do I really believe that there's some magic guy up there that's going to help us if we think to him hard enough? I don't think I would ever have actually at that time come out and called myself an atheist, but I was doubting. And so I did what good Christians are supposed to do. They tell you that you need to spend more time in the Word of God, spend time in the Word of God, do your devotions, stuff like that. Well, I decided rather than pull one of those devotionals out that just cherry picks all the good things, I was going to, read the whole Bible, because, if it's from God, the whole thing has to be good. And that was the first time I really came into contact with some of the nastier things, like when God commands genocide, like the genocide of the Amalekites, or the conquest of the Holy Land by Joshua, things like that. As I was reading about God saying to destroy the women and the children and the babies, and even kill the friggin' livestock. You can't have livestock from the previous people because those people are dirty, filthy things just because they were born in the wrong city. When I started reading that sort of thing, I was like, okay, this isn't really a God that I want to follow. This character, if he exists, is not deserving of worship. He is not good. So after looking at that, that kind of shattered my religion at that point. So I started looking around, look at the other religions. Like, well, I don't really like. There's no evidence to point me to these other religions. And eventually, I just came to accept the fact that there is no evidence for any God of any kind.
So was it more like a light switch kind of moment, or would you say that?
It was an incredibly gradual process. I could not point you to the specific time when I decided to just say, okay, yes, I am an atheist. I know I was watching videos on YouTube. Like shortly after stopping going to church, I started watching the Bible Reloaded. Just kind of see the atheist perspective on the Bible. Like, I read the Bible as a Christian, and somehow I got through a whole lot of garbage before I got to the real bad stuff. And like Noah's flood. That's the story of God committing genocide, but somehow I read that and it didn't really click that he's just destroyed everything for no good reason. But I guess it's a bit more graphic having your chosen race of people go in and destroy another race of people. It just makes it more obviously vile, I guess, because you're not raised with the cutesy little images of that your whole life.
Hey there, heathens! If you want to find out how the Bible Reloaded affected Viced Rhino here, you're going to need to subscribe to the Patreon. For as little as $1, you can find out how they affected him, what my favorite argument that the Bible Reloaded has put forth in their videos, and why Viced Rhino as a kid couldn't sleep with his feet uncovered. It may seem like a weird thing, but he's got a good reason for it. All of that is available if you go to patreon.com/Godless Engineer and sign up for as little as $1 a month. Hope you heathens enjoy the rest of this video, and I will see you later. Well, I'm kind of curious, like, what was the difference in the later exploration of the topic compared to the first exploration of it? Because, you had talked about when you became a fundamentalist Christian, you kind of explored the topic and you spent a lot of time on biased websites. Trying to figure out, if evolution is true or not. But then later on, you encountered the other side of the argument, which is that the way that it was? Were you only looking at the biased content, and then you looked at the other side of the argument and were convinced? Or, like, I'm just kind of curious what that contrast looks like for you.
Yeah, I definitely, I can look back at my former self and, like, it's interesting to think about how I would have thought about something back as a Christian. Just as a good example, Genesis 1 and 2, that's clearly two different creation myths from two slightly different religions that were kind of edited together poorly. As an atheist, you can read that and you can see that and you can kind of look at it as like it's an interesting history. Like, it's fascinating to watch how these cultures have changed and merged and what happens to their holy books and stuff like that. But as a Christian, you look at that and you have to reconcile how the different order of creation. You have to reconcile, like, how, Eve was created from a rib in this one, but she was, I forget, I think in Genesis 1, she's created from dust as well, or it doesn't specify. I don't know. I forget, but like there are all these little contradictions in there that as a Christian you have to justify. But as an atheist, you can look at it as like an interesting history. And, like, for instance, the talking snake, which everybody says was Satan, it's reading it as an atheist. It is clearly not Satan. Like, that is clearly an animal origin story, like how most people think of it in terms of, like, Native Americans. They have, like, my daughter's got a cute little book called 50 Silly Stories, and it's got an origin story for how the bear got its short little stubby tail. Is that, like, the cunning fox tricked it into trying to go ice fishing with its tail by sticking its tail in the water. And then when the bear caught the fish, he tried to whip them out, his tail snapped off. And that's how the bears got their little stubby tail. Clearly, that's the origin story for... like the Genesis account and in the garden with the serpent, that's clearly the origin story for why snakes slither. Like, why don't snakes have legs? Why do all other animals seem to have legs but snakes don't? It's like, oh, well, it's because they caused sin to come into the world or whatever. So God zapped him and said, you're cursed to crawl on your belly all the rest of your days.
Oh, and eat dust.
Yeah. Yeah, they eat dust. But I actually remember it, the same guy that taught the Christian lifestyle class in grade 8. He actually commented that he was saying that the serpent in the garden wasn't actually a serpent. It was actually a worm, because it's saying eat dust, and worms eat dirt, whereas snakes don't. So he was like, I've never heard anyone else say that. So I don't know how well accepted it is in the Christian community. I certainly know that in the biblical scholar community, it seems to be, kind of accepted that the serpent was a representation of Lilith, Adam's first wife, who didn't quite work out for him. But I thought that was an interesting, looking back at it, that's an interesting little way to kind of rationalize it and make it seem like that makes sense. If it's the most evil creature in the universe and God is putting a punishment on him, you want to make it as embarrassing as possible. Why make him a scary, terrifying snake when you could make him a gross worm?
Speaking of contrast, I'm wondering if you could look at your previous self, like fundamentalist Christian or even before that. And I'm wondering, how do you contrast now, other than, the fact that you don't believe in a God? Is your demeanor any kind of different? Is your personality different at all?
No, I'm the same guy. I have the same moral codes that I did then, slightly different. I guess before I would have said that, yes, sex before marriage is a sin. Whereas now it's just no, not really. There's no reason for that, especially in this day and age with contraception where it's at. But, aside from minor stuff like that, I'm the same person. I do not have the urge to go on murder rampages at all.
So it's just me then. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm
well,
kidding.
It depends. There are times when I feel like murdering my children, but I managed to restrain myself usually.
But no, I completely agree with you on not being really all that different of a person. Although I will say that the biggest thing that changed with me was, when I was a Christian, I always felt all this guilt was on me. And then when I decided that, I don't believe in a God, it felt like all of that guilt was just off of my shoulders. I didn't feel guilty anymore about, not going to church every Sunday and not being a better Christian. And, there's just a lot of guilt that Christianity kind of tries to pile on you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the guys I've responded to is actually his username on YouTube is The Dirty Christian, because Christianity just instills that in you, that all people are dirty, filthy, disgusting, unworthy beings. Where it's yeah, you know what? We all do bad things. We all do things we regret, but most of us are decent. I think most people have not done anything that deserves them a position in an eternal lake of fire. I'd actually even go so far as to say that nobody has done something bad enough to deserve eternal punishment. Not even Hitler or Stalin or anyone like that. Yeah, absolutely, they deserve to go through some shit, maybe torture them for the equivalent of however many people they tortured if you stack it on end to end. But, eventually it comes to a point where it just doesn't balance.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the whole idea of eternal torture for such a finite, existence is really unbalanced for anything. I'm kind of curious, what kind of advice could you give your younger self that was questioning religion?
Question it faster. Don't make it so gradual. Just get out. Also, I hid the fact that I was an atheist from my wife for about a year. I probably would, knowing how she reacted, I'd go back and say, she doesn't care. Just tell her it's fine.
Is she religious though?
No, not anymore. She was just kind of following me.
Oh,
Be like,
okay.
okay, this guy wants to go to church. I guess we'll go to church. And yeah, she did. There definitely are some benefits to having a community. Like when she broke her ankle shortly after we had our first child, and there was always someone at our door with like a casserole for us for dinner or whatever. So there are benefits to having a community, but you don't need to tack on religion to that. I have no problem with like joining clubs or things like that. People that will be a support net for you if you like fall on hard times or something, and paying dues for a club or something, whatever, go for it. But something about the church with bringing money into it, like the clubs basically just have like if it's a dues based club, they'll just be like, oh, you pay this much per month and you're a member of the club, fine, whatever, that's all you pay. Whereas the church is like, no, it has to be 10% of all of your income. I never got around to asking whether it was gross or net. I just kind of did net when I was tithing, assuming that would be enough. But I actually remember one of the churches I went to. It was a very, very small church, but the pastor went on a sermon series explaining why everybody needs to give at least 10% to the church, and the more they give, the more money they'll get out of life eventually. Anyways, he did a series on it. I think it lasted for 6 weeks. And he actually said in one of the sermons that I'm not going to stop preaching about this until everybody starts doing
it. That's dedication right there.
Oh yeah, but that was a very small church. Looking back on it, I'm sure that they were struggling for money. So it was a desperation ploy. Like, we owe all this money for stuff that we've done in the church, and money's not coming in, and our congregation's only got like 15 people in it. So everybody has to give everything they can.
Yeah, I've heard that some churches will like bill people for their tithes. Like, I know it's not a lot of churches. Like, I think there was one church in I think maybe Florida or somewhere like that. They billed a woman because she hadn't paid tithe or something like that, and so they sent her like a bill for her tithes. And it's like, God damn, really? Fuck.
I would wonder if it becomes taxable at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. You would think. You would think. I mean, we could do a lot of good money, or not good money. We could do a lot of good things with, if we were to actually tax the churches.
Oh, I would love for the churches to pay tax. It's just,
did you know?
Maybe you don't even necessarily have to say tax all the churches. You can consider the churches charities, but stop giving them these veils of secrecy. Like, have them open their books like any normal charity would.
Right.
Like, have churches rated on something like Charity Navigator, how much of their money actually goes to charity and how much goes to Joel Osteen's mansion.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, that you bring that up, there was actually a recent article that talked about how more than half of the money taken in by churches in general are actually stolen by the volunteers.
Oh, really? Like stolen as in they don't even give it to the church?
Right. Like
to the bookkeepers?
Well, right. Like I think the actual stat was that like less than half of the money that they took in was actually spent on like the church things, and the rest was like lost kind of to other things.
So not necessarily stolen per se, but not used for what people would think it would be used for.
Well, not used for the church and used for the personal betterment of somebody. So that's why I say stole, because they're taking it and they're not using it, for the church in any kind of way. They're using it for their own personal gain.
Yeah. No, that doesn't surprise me. I've read similar things in the past.
So can you say like or give us like one good piece of advice for like a new atheist that's just coming out of their faith? Like what's one good bit of advice that you can give them?
Probably calm down. Don't be so angry. You're just playing into their perception of what an atheist is when you sound angry. So Remain rational and calm.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, that most atheists are angry after, coming out of religion?
I can't say for everyone, but for me, it was just this whole feeling of like I've spent I forgot how old I was when I finally decided to call myself an atheist. I was probably about 27, 28, something like that. But it's like I've wasted a quarter of a century trying to please someone that doesn't even exist. Like I can think back to friends that I didn't have, to social events I didn't go to like just so much that I missed out on because I didn't think my imaginary friend would approve of it. So you finally come to terms with the fact that you don't believe in God anymore, and it's infuriating because I've missed out on so much in my life because of this guy that doesn't even exist. You got to take your anger out on something. That's probably why I started my channel in the first place. I haven't watched any of my old videos. If I go back, am I angry in the first ones? I don't know. Probably.
I know I was pretty angry in the first ones that I put up. They were also very shitty quality.
Oh yeah, everybody gets better over time. But no, I think I got most of my anger out by watching like Bible Reloaded, R and Raw. Amazing Atheist was good for anger. He's a pretty angry guy sometimes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I heavily rely on all of those people even now, which I don't think that Aaron really particularly likes me right now, but, I still look up to him and I still consider him a leader in the community. And, same goes with all of those people. And I think they all bring something important to the movement, in my opinion. But, since we're talking about your channel, I'm kind of curious. Why Viced Rhino?
I have my reasons. I'm not answering that question at the moment. I have plans for a purpose of the name reveal in the future.
Okay. What about a face reveal? Are you going to do that in the future?
Yeah, eventually. I'm not really overly concerned with being anonymous.
No, I wouldn't be. I mean, me personally, like the reason why I'm on camera and not an avatar or something is, I started my Facebook page and that got really popular. And, somebody was criticizing me one day as like, oh, it's easy to say that behind a Facebook page and I can't even see your face. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I'll put up a video about it, and so I kind of felt like that was kind of the next step for me was, actually start doing videos. And it's been a really long road, but I'm finally kind of getting into a groove.
Well, for me, the main reason I don't show my face is because the room that I record in also happens to be the room that when we don't know where to put something, we just say, "Oh, just stash it in the office." So it's an embarrassing disaster.
We all have that room. It's the mysterious room that's, leads to other dimensions.
Yeah, so it's a huge pile of kids' toys just to my left.
Oh, yeah. Well, Viced Rhino, I'm really happy that I was able to have this conversation with you today. Everybody, he is linked down below, so if you want to, go down there, hit him up, and subscribe to him. Let him know that I sent you. And I guess I hope you have a nice night there, Viced. I can't wait for your next video. I try to watch them, and a lot of our content overlaps. So usually, like if I've already recorded my response to a video and then you put one up, I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, I've had that experience a few times myself.
I thought that you did fabulous on that fake school classroom where like the teacher was.
Oh yeah, that was my guest video for Godless Cranium.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Oh yeah, it was totally. It was, oh man, it was crazy.
Yeah.
But
I heard today people have been getting advertisements for Genesis Apologetics in front of my video for Genesis Apologetics. So
oh, really?
I kind of like the idea that Genesis Apologetics is paying me to debunk their garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. I know that like PragerU is one that had been putting ads in front of my videos. And so then I did about 3 videos debunking PragerU just so that it could be like PragerU ad and then fuck you, PragerU.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, everybody, like I said, go down there, subscribe to Viced Rhino, and I guess we'll see you heathens later.
All right, thanks for having me.
Oh, no, thank you, man. You're doing me the favor on this one.